Let's go back to the different audiences. If we're talking to investors, what are some of the benefits that we can tap into with a story? With the story of our company or our product. What do investors want to know? Yeah?
That you're a trustworthy person.
That you are a trustworthy person? Not bad. Absolutely. They don't want to give you anything that they know they're not going to get back. Yeah?
How long will they get the money back?
Yeah. In some cases, how much money they will get back and how long that might take. Good. What else? What would be a benefit to an investor of having spoken to you?
If you can provide something that's in market demand that they haven't noticed, like a speculation of why your product's going to stand out more than others and why it might be in demand in the future, so what they have to gain in the long term instead of just some, I don't know, it seems like you need to show them you've done your research and that you actually have a solid idea.
Yep, fantastic. They want to know that you've done your research, so that's trusting you, but they also want to know why this is in demand. They want to know that there is demand there. They want to know that whatever it is that you're talking about, there are people out there that will buy it. And it may be a large group of people, it may be a small group of people, but ultimately what they want is that. Now, there's another thing, when we really start thinking about our audiences, and this is something that is quite interesting. Does anyone here know how a venture capital firm works? No? Okay, cool.
They
Yeah?
kind of scout the projects and they kind of rounds of like in-person meeting talking about the details, and they do the due diligence and make kind of the decision altogether as follow their SOP of investment.
Yeah.
They will invest in it.
Absolutely. Now let me ask you something. The person who's scouting for the investments, basically imagine this. A venture capital firm is generally a partnership. You have the operating partner, you have the general partner, the managing partner, and then you've got they have the actual investors themselves, people who have given the money to the fund in order for the fund to return money back to them. Now, the worst thing that could happen to a venture capital fund, besides losing money on all of their investments, is not returning any money. If I give you $100 million, just me and 20 people give you $100 million, and that $100 million sits there for 2 years, I'm pissed off because it wasn't meant to sit there. I could have just popped it in a bank if I wanted to. So now, this is where it becomes really, really important. When I say you have to know who your audience is, you've got to actually put yourself in their shoes. So that person who is scouting companies to invest in, what pressure do you think they're under? Knowing that they have to go out, they have to talk to companies, they want to find companies, they have to run through the due diligence, they talk to them, they're aiming for things, different market, trustworthy investors, all of these things. What pressure, like if you were them, what would your boss be telling you to do? Like what would your boss be putting you under pressure to get done?
Number of good quality companies that you can invest.
Yeah. Company after company after company. If you're not bringing companies into the pipeline, you're failing at your job. That is the human condition, which means when you're talking to investors, you're not talking to money, and you're not talking to an organization. You're talking to a human who has their own pressures and their own stresses and all of those things. So now, how does that change your story? How does that change what you include or not include? How does that make it easier for them to put you into a pipeline? That's just investors. Imagine looking at customers. When we look at customers, what is a customer?
Who will pay on your project?
Someone who's going to pay for your product. Who are they?
Yeah, I was gonna say people.
People. They're us. We're customers. I went out to Asda the other day. It was brilliant because I had my daughter with me, and my daughter's 13, and she's just. She's now year 10. She's supposed to be year 9, but she's now in year 10. She's doing economics GCSE, and really, really enjoys it. But I wanted to show her one of the things that she was going through. And so we were at Asda's, and up there were some crisps, and my wife had sent me a text and said, hey, find out what kind of weird crisp flavors they got going out for Christmas, right? So I said, okay, good. And so the kettle chips here, the Terrell's here, and then the Asda brand chips, the Asda brand crisps. So I looked at the kettle chips, and I know my wife likes the salt and black pepper kettle chips. I know that she'll be happy with that. So I grabbed one of those, put it in my basket. And then my daughter started taking pictures of all the weird flavors. And my wife wrote me back and said, my wife wrote her back and said, how much are they? And I said, and my daughter said, Mommy wants to know how much they are. I was like, tell her they're £1, and she's gonna want all of them. And then my daughter gets off the phone and goes, yeah, she wants all of them. So I grabbed all of the different crisps, I put them all in the basket. And I said, now tell her the kettle chips are £2.64. Ask her which ones she wants. And my daughter texted back, she said, get rid of those 2 flavors, but keep the black pepper and salt. And I went, I kind of knew that, but I just wanted to double check. Now, my wife in this case is the customer. And the lesson to my daughter was what we call substitutes. And substitutes in economics are things that are basically the same, that you can swap one out for the other, depending upon your rationality. And your rationality in this point is one bag costs £1 for a big bag, the other bag costs £2.64. If they are basically the same, I'm gonna buy the £1 ones. Unless another aspect like quality comes into play, in which case I'm gonna pay the £2.64. So when you're looking at your product and you're looking at customers, you have to be able to identify not just your own competitive advantage, but you've got to be able to identify where they might go if they don't go to you. Now, it's tough to do that with a new idea. So, for example, the company that we started was 2004. My wife and I started a tea company, and we started importing a lot of different loose leaf teas, flavored teas, all of these things that you now see kind of everywhere. We're one of the first people to do it. And we started on market stalls. We opened our first shop after 2 years. Eventually we had a chain of 7 shops across London, including Soho and all of these wonderful places. And everybody would look at us and they would say, why are you opening a shop there? There are 2 Starbucks on either side of you. And I thought to myself, I was like, why wouldn't I open a shop here? Starbucks has already done the market research. This is a great corner. And they said, yeah, but aren't you afraid Starbucks is going to take your customers? And I said, but those aren't my customers. We are not a substitute for Starbucks. In fact, we're probably a complement to Starbucks because they're known for coffee, we become known for tea. People are going to Starbucks and like, oh, do we have to go to Starbucks? Why don't we go to that independent place? The person who loves the Starbucks goes, okay, fine, let me get my takeaway and then we'll go to the independent place because I'm not going to drink their coffee, but you can have their tea. And those are the different stories that come out, and that's how we plan them. So, starting at the top, we identify our customers and we work out what is the benefit of what we are doing to them. Partners, what are some of the benefits of someone partnering with us? What are the benefits to them of partnering with us? Customers, what are the benefits to them of keeping us instead of going to different substitutes? Investors, what are the benefits to them of having had that meeting with us and possibly bringing us on board? All of those things come into it, and this is how we craft our stories. So now that we've found out what the benefits are, now we go into the story structure, which is think, feel, do. What do we want them to think while we're talking? What do we want them to feel while we're talking? And what do we want them to do when we've finished? Now, there's a lot of different things here, and before we get started, because we're just gonna go into tables and start drafting a story. The actual mechanics of a story is really, really simple, but a lot of us get it wrong so often. And the mechanics of a story is this. There is a main character. There is an inciting incident, so something happens to this main character. There is a journey that they go on, or learn through, or do. And at the end there is a resolution, and probably some learnings. It's pretty much every story we've ever heard, right? Look at it. Family's over for the holidays, they're all going on holiday, they leave a little boy behind, little boy's in the house, people try to break in, he fights them off, family comes back, everybody lives happily ever after. That is a story arc, right? And it has to have those components, otherwise it's just an anecdote, or it's an example. And so a story has to have, this was me, this was happening, this is what they did, this is how they got over it, and this is what they took forward. So if we're talking to investors and we want to prove, or customers, and we want to prove that they can trust us and they want to prove that this is really, really important and that people can grab a hold of this, then we may start with our failures and tell them about those, and tell them about our resilience, and tell them about how we then went and found a guru to be able to help us through it, and then we transformed the project, and now it's actually better than it ever was, give me some money. And that could be the story that we're telling. But it has to have these things. Now, the other thing is that stories can be of any length. I told you the story of going out to buy crisps with my daughter. Does anybody know how long it took me to tell that story? A little bit more than 10 seconds, but a little bit under 2 minutes. It wasn't quite as fast as I normally can be. Normally I can tell a story in about a minute. That was a little bit under 2 minutes. But it made a point, and everybody now will know what economic substitutes are, even if you don't study economics, because you'll remember crisps. And that is the idea behind this, is it jams in. So a couple of different versions for us, especially as STEM founders, could be an elevator pitch to get a meeting with a mentor or to get a meeting with someone who can help you further. So that might be a 10-second thing. Listen, I am trying to solve this problem, and here's my idea, and you would benefit from helping me because I'm going to put your name on it, whatever the case may be. That could be your elevator pitch. The next one might be a little bit longer. It might be written, or it might be in person, and it is an investor intro or email. That also has to have the story in it. And then lastly, we've got a pitch deck. Now, a lot of the times people do it. I work with a number of different organizations. The most famous one for doing this is probably, well, actually there are two. It's usually either investment banks or Unilever. But what they do is they run presentations for information. And so they load their decks with data, and they kind of walk you through. And the entire purpose of their presentation is to provide you with a ton of information because you are senior leadership and therefore you will make a decision. But they never include stories, and they always add too much. And so instead they need to talk around their slides. And it's the same thing with us. When we create a pitch deck for our idea, even if it's just for us, so going back to that fifth person is us telling a story for us. Your deck, your anything that you write down has to tell a story. It has to tell a narrative, and that narrative is what will keep you going. And that narrative is actually what will point out any different ideas or different things that don't work. Now, the idea of going into the benefits, we've already talked about these mainly, but for example, this one actually is really interesting. I had a friend of mine who worked at an organization. It wasn't a big organization, but every morning, because they had such disparate teams all over the world, it took his team about 90 minutes to connect everything, like to kind of touch everything and read through all the communications and get an idea of what's been going on while they weren't there. It was happening over the course of the different time zones. And then they could get to work. And so he went to his manager and he said, look, I really want to buy some software that will actually have all of this. So a piece of CRM software that contains all this information so that we can log in. And it's only going to take us 30 minutes. The manager said no. Okay. So he went back and he tried a different story. And instead he used, and there are so many different kinds. So I will, at the end there's a QR code. So scan it and I will send you over different kits that has all this information. But one of the things is different storytelling and different influencing tactics. And one of them is called an inspirational story, or what you could call a golden opportunity. And so he pitched it differently. He went back to his manager and said, look, right now it takes all 5 of us 90 minutes to get into work. One, that is, 7.5 hours cumulative work over the course of the morning. But 2, it's 90 minutes of your time as well. What would you do with an extra hour a day? What would you do if you had an extra hour a day to be able to catch up on things, to be able to set strategy, to be able to set all of the different things that you spend an hour after work completing and thinking about? What could you do there? And the manager signed off on it because he gave him an inspirational reason as to why to spend this money. And that was just a different narrative. Exact same result, exact same product, but a different narrative. So, lastly, the last thing I want to touch on before we go in is AI for storytelling. So many people I work with use chat like Google that's